We're not open for breakfast.
It's all very legal. We have a warrant.
It's a little sticky.
What exactly are you looking for, Willis?
This is a murder investigation.
It's a congressional matter. I can assure you, citizen, that if we discover that you're involved, the consequences will be abrupt and severe. Who are they?
I pick them up off the boulevard. I like a good menage every now and then.
Welcome to part 2 of our Barb Wire episode. But before we go into real talk, it's time for PP, our patron pitch. This is where we let our patrons know what they can expect in their exclusive patron feed, and we also let non-patrons know what they're missing out on. So, we're going to start with the ground floor tier. $1. What does $1 get you? Well, 4 stars gets you access to our cutting room floor segments, which is just the stuff that doesn't make it to episodes. And also, every month we get at least one bonus episode picked by a patron. This month, patron Dan Brennick is making us watch the original Dolomite. Alex, do you know anything about Dolomite?
Extremely little.
Okay, well, I'm not going to say anything because I've seen the Netflix movie Dolomite That's My Name, which is actually our next episode. But Dan, always a champion of Netflix movies, which makes sense because he runs a podcast that's about Netflix. He's making us watch Dolomite Is My Name, the Eddie Murphy adaptation for our next episode. And on the patron feed, Dolomite, which is like the actual. It's not Eddie Murphy. It's the real, I don't remember the name of the actor that Eddie Murphy's playing in the Netflix movie. But, that guy made a lot of movies, and I think Dolomite might be his first. So we're going to get a twofer. If you're a patron, you get to hear us talk about Dolomite Is My Name on the main feed. And then you get to hear us talk about one of the movies that it's referenced in that biopic. Sounds like a lot of fun. And also, by now, we've already recorded Lohan Part 2. That one's in post-production. And we're gearing up to recording Lohan Part 3. Alex,
shit gets dark, y'all.
Yes, it was not as happy-go-lucky of a recording when we did Part 2. And I'm not going to say I'm dreading Part 3 because, I am looking forward to watching all those movies. But I just know that on the personal side, it's... I think I might have mentioned it during the part 2 recording, but I'm just glad that I know that it kind of has a happy ending by the time we get to part 4. Otherwise, it would be too much of a downer to go down this rabbit hole.
Part 3. I'm looking. It's been a quest to get chapter 27 on the podcast, and that's more just so I can make fun of Jared Leto than it has anything to do with Lindsay Lohan. But I'm curious about the movies we're gonna be diving into, and so far it's been we've learned a lot about not only ourselves but the life and times of Miss Lohan, and I'm hoping for a happy ending too.
There you go. Hope with us, hope together with us on the first tier, the Travoltis of our patron channel. Now, if you want even more goodies, well, you go up the tiers, Winonis and upwards. You also get our pre-recording notes. You get our quick video reviews. We have to record the QVR for Bad Genius, which was Ryan's pick. And Alex, I'm just going to throw the next QVR at you and our patrons so they can start salivating, as our next dual QVR is going to be on the movie Bullet Train, which is on Netflix. It's from Katie and Oti, who wanted to talk about that. And I've seen it. I know you haven't. I know you're kind of reticent to check these action movies that go over 2 hours. But this has Brad Pitt, and we love Brad Pitt on this show. So hopefully that tips the scales.
Just barely goes over 2 hours. And it's got Michael Shannon in it, so.
Yes. Yeah, it has an all-star cast.
WWE superstar Bad Bunny.
I don't know who that is.
You don't know who Bad Bunny is?
I've heard of Bad Bunny. Isn't he a singer?
Even by accident, how do you not know who Bad Bunny is?
I move in different circles.
Fair enough.
So that will be a quick video review, a dual quick video review for you this month. And then, of course, we have Contrarians After Hours. That's the spin-off show where we tell you about other things that we're watching, that we're thinking about, listening to, reading, anything that doesn't have to do with what we were talking about on the main show most of the time. Alex, what are you bringing to Contrarians After Hours this time?
To be honest, I don't know if I have, then this will be a follow-up to it. I don't know if I've ever spoken at length about I Think You Should Leave and my thoughts on it. But the new season of that just came out, and I've already watched it, I think, twice through. So talk
Amazing.
about I Think You Should Leave, and then, yeah. It was a bit of a tie-in because there is a bit of a wrestling connection on there, but also more or less than to just put like the word out there to see if I can get any feedback on it. I've really been diving deep into the incredible bootlegging world of pro wrestling. Like I only knew the surface level stuff, but I've been getting more and more into it. Kind of want to talk about some of my recent acquisitions that are even interesting from like a movie perspective, and see if anyone out there, because you got to keep these things on the DL. Like the people who do this, like specifically say part of you buying from me is you can't tag me in any of this shit, or say you got it from me on like social media because that draws attention, yada yada yada. And I'm curious because we do have a good following on our Patreon, and because I do want to keep the things kind of quiet. I want to know if there's more out there for like the movie community and the music community, and if so, give me the fucking hookup. So I'm going to talk about the wonderful world of bootlegging that I've become more and more aware of recently. And also, I Think You Should Leave.
All right. Well, on my side, Alex, I've never seen Fatal Attraction, the movie with Glenn Close and Michael Douglas. Like, I know it as a big part of pop culture. I think I've seen, the relevant parts of it. I know like the big moments. I know about the bunny. I know how it ends. I know the plot. It's Fatal Attraction. I think that if you're part of a certain age range, you know about it as part of pop culture. But I've never seen it. Never really felt the need to see it. And now there's a Hulu miniseries. I guess it's 8 episodes. I don't know if that's it or if there's more coming. But it's Fatal Attraction as a TV show starring Joshua Jackson in the Michael Douglas role and Lizzie Kaplan in the Glenn Close role, and it is a hoot, as you like to say.
Goddamn hoot.
Yeah, there's a lot to talk about. And I haven't finished the season. I might be finished by the time that we record the after hours, but I really want to talk about it and want to hear from anybody who's watched it as well. And then briefly, because it's not like I have a whole lot to say about this, but I really kind of like put it on the record and tell you about it. I watched the first ever Steven Spielberg movie, Duel, and also the first ever George Lucas movie, THX 1138. And I can thank/blame our Filmbusters friends for that, because they covered both movies on their show. And I was like, well, I've always been curious to see where it all started, and why not? So Fatal Attraction, Duel, THX 1138. I Think You Should Leave, and the wonderful, mysterious world of bootlegging. Are you going to be hunting laser discs, Alex? Is that what you're trying to do?
No, Laserdisc, I told you about, and this was in after hours, about my jaunt to LA, that booth that had the first WrestleMania on Laserdisc for $100, and I had to talk myself out of buying it. Laserdisc seems like one of those things that once you like go there, you can't go back. And I'm still doing a good job about not full board collecting VHS, just kind of getting some here and there to kind of sprinkle through my collection. I need to keep myself disciplined, but again, because I've learned more about the bootlegging community and like how it's better to keep it hush hush, I want to talk about it behind a paywall. So if any of our patrons have some info for me, they can, give it that way.
The call is out. If that doesn't make you want to become a patron, I don't know what will. Just be part of Alex's underground network, bootlegging.
Between that and we're, as of part 2, we're already going to be about 5 hours into our Lohan journey. You got the 10 plus hours of our Rock Cena mega series, all of our previous bonus episodes, all the way back to our first patron post of our bonus episode on Blue is the Warmest Color. There's a lot of shit that goes down there. If you haven't already, just throw us a buck and look around, man. To all of our current patrons, y'all know we love you so dearly. And as I always end this spiel with, we are taking and reviewing applications, and they will quickly be accepted and approved. Patreon.com/Contrarian Prime. Check it out. $1. There's a lot that goes on there. I can't, like, the range of emotions and topics, we're at the point where they can't even really be contained. It's just like, we got to hit the high points of what's there, and then you can discover other things on your own.
Couldn't have said it better. And now, Alex, let's turn on the rain machine, the slow-mo. And
yo, pretty ladies around the world.
let's dance our way to real talk.
This is just like my favorite song. I got you, babe.
Don't call me babe.
This movie kind of rules.
Are you having a Howard the Duck moment?
No, because Howard the Duck, we think is not bad. Like, it's enough to almost be good. And its legacy as one of the worst movies of all time is absolutely ridiculous. This is bad, and it knows it's bad. And that is worth a lot. And Pamela Anderson is not acting in a way that is cringeworthy to watch, because this is the introduction here, and we'll get to our the reason we're doing this and also the critical quotes. But like, there is a very fine line that is walked, and I don't know how Julio feels about this movie, but Julio and I repeatedly through the history of our podcasting journey have said that movies like The Room or Uwe Boll movies, or those movies that are like terrible, Plan 9 from Outer Space, that are just awful, that people watch to laugh at, that does nothing for us. Like that is one facet of film fandom that Julio and I really have no capacity for. Now, something like this, a movie like this, is so remarkably up my alley and so remarkably not up Julio's that I'm curious how he's going to feel about it. But my main takeaway when it was over is that I've always had a very confused idea of what this was. Now that I've watched it in full, this is a fun little movie. It's not good, but it's fun. So that's my lead off. Let's go through the critic quotes that you've acquired that praise this movie. I have one of my own. And then we'll get to the most important critic for this particular episode, which is Gerald, and we'll see what he feels about it.
All right. Got 3 fresh tomatoes. None of them are what I'm assuming is your big gun. They're just like twitching. Your fingers are twitching near your holster. But first, we'll go with Hal Hinson from the Washington Post, who says, the movie carries its cyberpunk variation right through to the end, and usually with enough wit and craziness to freshen the mix. Then there's Pamela, whose tight, disciplined performance deserves more respect than it will almost certainly get.
That's a bit overboard.
But if I read you correctly, if I understood you correctly from your opening statement, you do think
my opening salvo.
Yes, you're like, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, she knows it's a bad movie.
I'm just a simple caveman.
Would you say at least that it deserves more respect than it certainly got?
Oof.
The performance, not the movie.
The respect's a pretty intense word. I don't know her, and I don't know.
You have to know her. You saw the movie.
The whole point is, I know what if it's what I think it is. Yes, if it's right. if it was genuinely her giving 100% and thinking like this was her fucking Sophie's Choice, then no. But like from how I interpreted it, I think this movie gets too much vitriol. I think that there's, or at least the way I see it, it's there's a simpler way of looking at it, because yes, also I also don't know Pamela Anderson, but I watched the movie and her performance, I formed an opinion on it that was independent of her public persona, because I really, other than the Tommy Lee tape, the scandal, and knowing that she was in Baywatch, I have very little connection with Pamela Anderson. Like, you had to remind me that she was in Home Improvement. She walked Kevin Nash to the ring at WrestleMania 11, man. Come on.
Oh, I forgot. I missed that one. I didn't go to that one. So I saw it, and I think that whatever problems this movie has, like, Pamela Anderson's performance is definitely not one of them. I think that whether it's perfect casting or that she is way more I don't want to say talented, because that's kind of insulting at this point, but that she has
way more
range.
commanding of the screen.
Well, yeah, because you're thinking, just like as a general.
Outside of her obvious, she's fucking hot as shit. You know what I mean?
Right. But it's like, was she just cast for her looks, or was she cast because they're like, oh, well, she gets the joke. She knows what it's like to be objectified, so she can turn it into an asset here and really have zero problem playing a character that is, all about her sexuality. And so I do think that, like, people that watch it and they're like, oh man, she's a bad actress. I don't think they're right.
I agree with that.
Yeah, I think they're misjudging the performance. I think that she's doing exactly what the movie needed her to do. And if you don't like it, well, you don't like the tone of the movie. It's not really her fault. But I don't know. That's just one contrarian talking, or two of them, since you agree with me. All right, next. Jeffrey M. Anderson from Combustible Celluloid says, there isn't a scene that Anderson Lee walks through that didn't grab my attention. Is that because she's really hot? Or is that because you appreciate the performance, Jeffrey? That quote is not specific enough. And then we have Kim Williamson from Box Office Magazine, who says, the focus remains on Lee throughout, and except for one flashback scene in which we see the young, compassionate woman she once was, she pretty much delivers. So I guess she didn't like the flashback. Did you like the flashback? I didn't think that there was a whole lot to it.
Yeah, there's not enough there for it to be, like, offensive.
Yeah, that's the one weak spot.
It is so funny because it is so stylized and, post-apocalyptic to see, like, them just wearing the standard army fatigues from any war movie ever. It's
perfectly pressed.
Yeah.
All right. Go to the big gun, and then we'll come back to Gerald.
The big boy, the one and only Roger Ebert, from RogerEbert.com. His review dated May 3rd, 1996. Of course, the release date of this movie. Raj went on a scale of 4, right?
Yes.
He gave Barb Wire 2.5 stars and a thumbs up. And he writes, Barb Wire takes place in the year 2017, the worst year of my life, according to Barb. We are in the middle of the Second American Civil War. The Congressional Dictatorate has seized control of America. They used an HIV derivative named Red Ribbon to wipe out Topeka. But Barb lives in the last free city where she runs a nightclub. Times are hard, so hard Americans insist on payment in Canadian dollars. Barb steers clear of politics. She's friends with the local police chief, who's on the take, but has a good heart. Then she gets involved in contraband. Some identity lenses are missing. Whoever possesses them can get a free passage into Canada. A little guy says he knows where they are. A fat guy offers to buy them. The Congressional Dictatorate troops, dressed like Nazis, come into Barb's club and tear it apart looking for them. You must remember this. It's Casablanca recycled. The biggest howler in the credits is the line, based on a story by Eileen Chaikin. Chaikin? Would it have killed Eileen to acknowledge Casablanca? True. There are differences, too. In this movie, a kiss is not necessarily just a kiss. Not when Barb's sex life includes nailing guys through the middle of the forehead with a stiletto heel. Barb, inspired by a comic book heroine, is played by Pamela Anderson Lee, the Baywatch star, in leather, chains, and an industrial-strength wonder bra. As the movie opens, she's on a trapeze being sprayed by a hose in slow motion, a scene that reminded me of the climax of Behind the Green Door. That's when she's posing as a stripper. Later, when she poses as a hooker, it's to gain entry into an apartment so she can blow out the wall to rescue a hostage. Bogey was a wimp compared to Barb, whose personal DNA, if I heard correctly, quote, holds the antidote to our secret weapon. The movie is wonderfully confusing, but I think that means she could have saved Topeka, whether by preventative intercourse or otherwise, I haven't a clue. Here's an important line to what we're talking about. Pamela Anderson Lee, while not a great actress, is a good sport. She's backlit in endless scenes where if she could have figured out a way to send her breasts in separately, she could have stayed at home. Don't call me babe, she says, a trademark line like make my day or I'll be back. Everyone who calls her babe pays with his life. One guy tries to light her cigarette, which turns out to be a blowgun, and gets a poison dart between his eyes. The parallels with Casablanca are fun to spot. The Sidney Greenstreet character named Big Fatso, Andre Rosie Brown, reclines in the shovel of a Caterpillar tractor at his junkyard, munching on a turkey leg. There you go. Or maybe an ostrich leg. It's so big. and offering to buy the contact lenses. But Barb has mercy on an idealistic young woman, that's Victoria Rao, who is married to a resistance leader and gives her the lenses. At the end, the hero is aboard an Air Canada flight. The one big scene from Casablanca that's missing here is the musical showdown in which the Patriots sing Maricelis to drown the Nazi anthem. Considering that Barb Wire runs a punk leather club, here's today's quiz. What song would be the Congressional Dictator's anthem? And what song would the party-loving S&Msters sing to drown it out? The movie has been rated R for nudity/sexuality. There is some nudity, mostly weirdly lit. The sexuality involves various forms of foreplay to violence. There is nothing resembling eroticism except for the dialogue, "She's as tender as a Tuscan veal." Barb Wire's breast, winced into place and clamped down by leather and steel costumes, seemed as immobile as the similarly shaped fenders on a 1957 Olds Rocket 88. "Look at those guns," a guy says approvingly, not referring to firearms. There are some strange moments. You know, the basic scene where a guy is thrown through a window and we get a slow-mo shot from 3 different angles as he falls to the ground? Barb Wire achieves a first by showing a chair thrown through a window and descending in slow-mo, etc. Movies like this stir a certain affection in my heart. The filmmakers must have known they were not making a good movie, but they didn't use that as an excuse to be boring and lazy. Barb Wire has a high energy level and a sense of deranged fun. There's as much sheer work in this film as in films 10 times as good, which is both encouraging and depressing, I suppose.
How long is this gonna take?
As long as it takes, citizen. As long as it takes.
I don't have a rating from Gerald, but he did send a message saying, "You can quote me as saying nothing was hotter than Pam in Barb Wire. Is she a good actress? No. Is it a good script? No. Does any of that matter? No. She's so hot in it that she can literally get away with murder." So, as suspected, Gerald, I'm a big fan of this movie because Pamela Anderson is hot, and it's hard to disagree with him on that front. Now, I really want to go back to this. I mean, he says it right. He just said it, and that quote. He doesn't think that she's a good actress, and I don't think I agree with that. I can't tell you based on just what little I've seen of her. I can't tell you if she's a good actress or a bad actress. Like I know that like the rest of the cast in Baywatch, she's like good at running across the beach. But I don't know what her range is. I know what my preconception of her is, which is like, oh, well, you know, she's probably not that great of an actress. It's just somebody that got cast for her looks or whatever. But then I watched this movie and I'm like I said, you know, just a little bit ago, whether it's just really good casting or it's just that she got what the movie was going for, or maybe both, you know, just I think that she is pretty much perfect in this role. That doesn't mean that somebody else couldn't have done it. And it certainly doesn't mean that she is a great actress, but I wouldn't just say that she's a bad actress based on what I see in this movie. I think that she carries the movie and I think that she works really well. Now, is this very much against what the comic book character is supposed to be? Maybe that's where some of the hate comes from, but I didn't see any quotes, at least on Rotten Tomatoes, that were about that, you know? Whenever there was a quote that was about her performance, it was just like, oh yeah, she's not good. I don't think so. I think that I think she's the best part of the movie. I mean, just because of how at ease she feels in the role. Do you have a different experience, Alex? Are you more well versed in Baywatch than I am, to where you can tell me, no, she's not really that great. This was just kind of a stroke of luck with the casting and the material?
Well, first of all, I need to circle back. I was reading that article phonetically, and you know how I am. I have to correct myself when I'm wrong, or else it'll drive me fucking insane. It's Marseille is the name of the song. It's the French song, Marseille. I read it phonetically, and I don't want to seem like an uncultured swine, so...
I know it in Spanish. I just know it's La Marsellesa. That's all I can tell you.
Marsellesa? Okay. Yeah. Marseille, I believe, is the correct French pronunciation, so I was kind of in the zone reading things phonetically, and when I got past that sentence, I was already like, you fucking idiot. So, the 90s were a time when it was just like, anyone can be a movie star. We can make anyone a movie star. And that's obviously not exclusive to the 90s, but it was way more like there was like Howie Long and Brian Bosworth. And I'm thinking of people that got like movies made. And I think Pamela Anderson, unfortunately, gets kind of lumped in with those people of the 90s, Jenny McCarthy, that type of thing. She was very of the time. And she was like a superstar from Baywatch and, looked like $1 million. But I think even like on Home Improvement, I've rewatched some of that show since. Like she's just a young actress, like that's trying to get a break in that, and she does a really good job. And I don't know if she was ever given a platform to show what she really could do. I don't think that she was, I made the Sophie's Choice joke earlier. I don't know if she was ever going to be Meryl Streep, but she definitely got the tone of this. I think most of the people involved with this figured out the tone pretty quickly, but she's great with the one-liners and the delivery of it. And obviously she's sexualized in this, but she seems so comfortable in it and carries herself as such like a badass in it that it doesn't come across as uncomfortable or forced. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And I wouldn't say my experience is much more extensive than yours. I think she's someone who got into the spotlight and gained star power so quickly that I don't know if anyone would know what to do with like the level of stardom she was at the point in time she had it. And I kind of wish we had more things like Barb Wire to reference. Not necessarily, I don't wish she made a bunch of movies like this, but something that was a movie she starred in to see, more of what she was capable of. She was just like this supernova of what was relevant at the moment. Like she did a ton of TV things where she's just Pamela Anderson.
Right.
And so I don't know. It kind of makes you wonder if she could have been like an action heroine, or maybe there was more to it. Maybe she had more to offer, but it just kind of came and went so fast that, there's really no going back. Like, look at this sandwich here. She did Barb Wire in 96 and had bit parts and cameos in a few things. And then like Borat was 2006. Remember that? Remember her in that movie? Yeah. And so,
but that's
like
a movie that basically is about the experience of the public image that we have of Pamela Anderson.
Well, what I'm trying to say is like by that point in time, it seemed like the opportunity to give her more was gone. She just did cameos in Scary Movie 3. It was in a Baywatch movie. And then Borat came out where it was kind of like, haha, remember Pamela Anderson? So I don't know. This has already gotten way more deep on the subject than I expected to.
Well, because that's really, when I think that I just wanted to get that out of the way, because at least I knew my bias going in, and my bias was like, oh, it's just that bad Pamela Anderson movie, and Pamela Anderson movie had a meaning for me that was, oh, she's hot, and they made a movie where they just basically the movie's an excuse for them to show her half naked and get horny guys to fork, I don't know, $10, $12, whatever the price of a ticket was.
Oh, come on. It was like $7.
So,
probably not even
that's
that.
True. That's true. Back in the 90s. And $3.50, you went to the early bird. But there's more to it than that. It's actually, it was more to it than that. And her performance is more than just like, oh, I'm hot and I'm going to like stand here and, let people come to me. And by the way, the other thing that kind of like affected or influenced my idea of what Pamela Anderson was that she was the inspiration / voice for Stripperella. Did you ever hear of the Stripperella cartoon?
I remember Stripperella.
Created by Stan Lee.
Yep. It was on Spike TV, right?
Yep. Yeah. That's why I remember it catching my attention. And so, of course, that fits like, Stripperella. Oh, like a stripper with big boobs, a blonde stripper with big boobs, played by Pamela Anderson, inspired by Pamela Anderson. It just kind of fits that narrative. And it's like, yes, we, again, as a society, we reduced her to the stereotype of the hot blonde with big boobs. And then I guess she never really, at least for most of us, she never really transcended that. And so if you have that image in your head, then you watch Barb Wire, and in my experience, it suddenly opens up this whole other side of her. We're like, oh, she actually has a really good sense of humor about herself and about this type that she's associated with, and she can have a lot of fun with it, and she's really good at it.
A girl's gotta do what a girl's gotta do. And in this world, you gotta use everything you got.
Hey, handsome.
Where I stand with this movie, in my experience, because I had a good time watching it, it's not Howard the Duck. And I will get to, as to why I don't think it's Howard the Duck. But I did have similar preconceptions going in where I'm like, oh, this is going to be really bad. And then it turns out that no, it's actually fun. And a lot of the people that are negative on it are just, I guess they just don't want to have fun the way that they don't want to have fun with Howard the Duck. At the same time, I think it's way better than a couple other movies that came to mind while I was watching it, which we've talked about on the show. Tank Girl and Aeon Flux.
Yeah.
Similar kind of like post-apocalyptic female heroes that are kind of wacky. And the world building is kind of like all over the place. The mythology can get complicated. And those movies, I remember they just didn't work. They were either too stylized or too quirky or too like. So again, I'm just like, man, Barb Wire, I wouldn't say that they nail it, but they do really well with what they have because I've seen what happens. I have examples in my mind of how it is when it goes wrong. And, Charlize Theron, Lori Petty, I know they're good actresses and they couldn't really carry those movies. Whereas like, here's Pamela Anderson and she comes in and I think that she does a great job just carrying Barbed Wire on her back. I think that's commendable. And that's where I land. It's like, not Howard the Duck, because Howard the Duck
is
I
good.
think that's it's good and it does almost everything right. We talked about it in our episode, much to Sam's horror. We both really like Howard the Duck, and we both agreed that it kind of went off the rails towards the end. Whereas Barbed Wire, I think that where it falters is some of the supporting cast. And I'm not going to talk shit about Udo Kier, but specifically, I think that
he has nothing to do.
Yeah. I mean, he's fine for what it is. I was actually surprised. I don't know if this movie ever planned on having a sequel, but they basically write him out of the of the movie, right?
Oh, dude! Like at the end when he tags along for one of the rides, it's like, oh man, Udo Kier's gonna get a gun and like hang around the rest of the movie, but then he just kind of disappears.
No, he's like, you guys go have fun. I'm gonna bury your brother.
Yeah. Have you seen this mess? I got to fucking deal with this. Get out of here.
No, I think Jango Fett is not pulling his weight on this one. And
he's treating this way too seriously.
He's not having fun. I don't see chemistry between him and Pamela Anderson, and they're supposed to be. If we're gonna talk about Casablanca, it would be like Bogey not having chemistry with Ingrid Bergman. Right? Like if Ingrid Bergman comes into the bar and she's just not having any fun with anything, I guess, Casablanca is more serious, but still, if you just didn't feel those sparks, if you didn't care about that relationship, then that movie doesn't work. Of course, Barbed Wire is about more than the romance, but the romance is there. And I just, man, he was such a drag. Everybody else, like, I think that they do well. Udo Kier, the guy that plays Charlie, fucking Sander Berkeley, I love him. I was not kidding. Controller's Corner, everything I said is true. I geek out every time I see him anywhere. And here, he finally gets to play throughout the entire movie and play a juicy role where he's bad, but he's not really bad. And it's like Ebert said, he has a heart of gold. So that's really cool. But I don't like Jango Fett, and so that's a big problem. That's Howard the Duck. I liked everybody there, even fucking Jeffrey Jones. I mean, he did what needed to be done in that movie. Tim Robbins, Leah Thompson, of course.
Legendary performance by Leah Thompson. I think we talked about it in Howard the Duck a little bit, and obviously, LOL, me defending these movies because they're both comic book related, and now those have become like the bane of my existence. But it's weird, man. It's weird to put on 2023 glasses and see a movie like Barbed Wire for what it is. Universal Studios giving, almost $10 million to make this movie that has no precedent or grounds of working. I'm just saying, give it a shot. And then everyone hating it. They try to make a new movie star with Pamela Anderson. They cover random ass source material with Barb Wire, which was a Dark Horse comic. You made a movie like this today, not necessarily that it has to be based on a comic book, but like a movie that's all practical effects, no green screen. You know, a major studio invests in this, trying to make a big star off of someone who isn't at that level yet. People would lose their minds for this. In theory. I'm not saying that they would necessarily succeed or anything like that, but the idea of Barb Wire, the movie, is so far in the rear view now. And, you know, Howard the Duck, to a certain extent, was the same way. And when we talked about that, it's like there was no precedent for something like that really at the time, and everyone just hated it. So it has this really unfair, maligned legacy. And I think Howard the Duck, like you do, I think Howard the Duck is better than Barb Wire, but both of these, it's weird, man. It's weird that, like, when was the last movie that came out that people acted like it was the worst thing that's ever happened? Legitimately, not
the Mars movie, John Carter.
Yes. Yeah. Good one. But that's like 10 years ago. And it's just all about safe bets now. So there's part of me that welcomes putting myself for an hour and a half in a time capsule of thinking back to like when this was made and what the thought process was behind it. And like I texted you, there's not a single green screen in the entire movie. That's awesome. You know, the bad guy that dies at the end, when they cut to the wide shot, it's clearly just a dummy sitting on that cart that they drop, and I'm just like, yeah, man, feed me that shit, dude. I don't need your realistic bullshit. One thing I do want to talk about too is it seems as though a lot of the criticism, besides on Pamela Anderson, was like the kind of ridiculous nature of it. And it is a Dark Horse comic, based on a Dark Horse comic, Barb Wire. And I remember as a kid, Dark Horse comics were, and I only had single issues. I never had like whole series of theirs or even graphic novels. It would be random things handed down from my cousin or getting the dollar bin at the comic book store or something. The Dark Horse comics were always the really, you know, the women had massive cleavage. They were really violent. The dialogue in them was real, like, hardened and, you know, sexy. And so I think, having never read Barb Wire, but knowing and being familiar with just like random Dark Horse comics, this feels really in line with what they would have tried to have achieved in their comics. And the most famous examples from a film perspective, Sin City is a Dark Horse comic. I think Sin City sucks, but that, you know, that's just me. But you think about that, and just and all it takes is the right coat of paint, and, you know, suddenly you're visionary. And then of course Hellboy, which we're both big Hellboy fans. Anyway, my point is, Dark Horse comics have been covered in film, have been translated to film, to much more accepting and positive reviews. And I think this one kind of just got a bad rap, and it seems to fall in that Howard the Duck category of you and I, and, you know, people who like it, I assume, can deduce the reasoning for that. But we're here to tell you specifically that it's not a really fair read on it.
I do believe I'm falling in love.
Get in line.
As we look towards wrapping up here, I did want to read an article I pulled from Screen Rant from March 3rd of 2022. Barb Wire's impact on Pamela Anderson's career. True story explained. Now, as has been discussed, I gave that Pam and Tommy show, I think, 2.5 episodes, and I absolutely detested it. So I didn't make it to the episode 7. So this is by Antonella Guglielsi. I'm sorry, Antonella. I'm trying here. It's 1 a.m, and we're powering through. Pam and Tommy, episode 7, focused on Pamela on the, parenthetically Lily James, on the eve of the premiere of her film Barb Wire, which was supposed to be her big break, but in reality negatively affected her career. The Hulu limited series reached its second to last episode, which showed more facets of Pamela's life that were affected by the release of her private sex tape with husband Tommy Lee, Sebastian Stan, while the first half of the series focused more on Rand, Seth Rogen, and his theft and revenge. The second half worked as a meticulous representation of the double standards Pamela had to face because of the release of her sex tape compared to her husband. This isn't really relevant to Barb Wire. That's absolutely true. She endured a bunch of shit she didn't have to, and negative backlash that by today's standards, I don't really think people... it's a victim of the time, and it's absolutely true. And I can't imagine the horror of that, man. Yes, she was in Playboy, and yes, her breasts are out in this movie. It's a lot different than making an intimate tape where you're having sex with your husband at the time and thinking like, hey, this is fun, this is for us, and then some fucker steals it and puts it on the internet for people. It's a very fair call out there. Barb Wire was portrayed by Pam and Tommy as the movie which would have finally led Pamela to reach the career and social standing she desired. Lily James's Pamela even hired a specific publicist in episode 3 to face the promotional period in the film's premiere, even before the sex tape scandal had built up, precisely because she had bet a lot on the movie's success. Her publicist ended up comforting her even about issues unrelated to Barb Wire, such as the sex tape spreading and the consequences of Pamela's reputation of suing Bob Guccione and Penthouse Magazine in episode 5. Pam and Tommy episode 7 showed the Barb Wire premiere and the subsequent sneaking out of Pamela and Tommy to a regular theater in order to see the people's unfiltered reactions, which unkindly ridiculed the film and Pamela's role in it. Similarly to what's shown in Pam and Tommy, Barb Wire was a flop in terms of earnings. The comics-based action had an estimated budget of $9 million, but made less than $4 million at the box office on the opening weekend in the U.S. Barb Wire scored 28% amongst critics and 14% amongst viewers on Rotten Tomatoes, making it a big failure. Okay, first of all, I don't know if those metrics existed at the time, but go off. Not only for its earning, but also how it was received. The negative critics' consensus on the site can be summarized by the scathing top comment that said, Barb Wire could have been fun camp, but Pamela Anderson can't deliver her lines with any dramatic or comedic impact, which I think you and I have categorically disproven over the past 2 hours.
Yeah, fuck off. That's, finish the article, but I do have the final point that I want to make, and I don't know if you'll agree with me, but it's worth making.
This comment aims specifically at Pamela's acting expertise, creating a link between the film's failure and Anderson's part in it. While she hoped it would be successful, as it was Anderson's first protagonist role in a movie that wouldn't be released direct to video, but to cinemas, Barb Wire hindered Anderson's career. After the 1996 action movie, Anderson ended up appearing either as herself on films or her renowned Baywatch character, C.J. Parker. The only other role in a major franchise Anderson had after Barb Wire happened in 2003 was Scary Movie 3, and this is kind of what we were talking about earlier. Barb Wire's tendency to heavily rely on Anderson's sex symbol status did not help her diversify her acting roles. As Pam and Tommy implied, it was Pamela's objective. It also didn't help that the movie's release was welcomed with harsh reviews. Still, one cannot forget the timing of Barb Wire's release, as it happened precisely when the sex tape was circulating. Pam and Tommy makes reminding the viewers of this detail its mission, subtly suggesting that Barb Wire's flop and Pamela's dwindling career could have been ascribed to how harshly Pamela was being judged precisely because of the tape. There's a couple things I already had touched on that article reiterates, but I think all that's just kind of worth calling out to put in perspective. And I do agree that comment is asinine, because I think both you and I found things to enjoy about her delivery of these lines and comedic timing and just her ability to, as Ebert said, be a good sport about it all. So, Julio, as we reach the end here of our journey through Dave Hogan's Barb Wire, as I mentioned, and I forgot to circle back to, returning Dave Hogan. He was the second unit director on Batman Forever and way back in the vault, Alien 3.
Speaking of diversifying your career.
It did say one last thing on Pamela Anderson to kind of just good on you, gal. It said she did a lot of her own stunts too, which is for a movie like this pretty fucking crazy. Okay, I know we're wrapping up here. I do want to circle back because I did mention it was nominated for 6 Golden Raspberry Awards, and as we do with the Oscars for the years we cover and the movies we cover, I always also need to circle back to call out what was nominated here. So, Barb Wire unfairly and unjustly. It was nominated for Worst Picture, Worst Actress, Worst Screen Couple, Worst Screenplay, Worst New Star, and Worst Original Song. Sadly, Pamela Anderson won Worst New Star.
Boo. Who is she up against?
Indeed. Worst New Star, Pamela Anderson beat out of... this is how ridiculous this shit is. Ellen DeGeneres and Mr. Wrong, the new serious Sharon Stone and Last Dance. Friends cast members turned wannabe movie stars. Jennifer Aniston and She's the One, Lisa Kudrow and Mother, Matt LeBlanc and Ed and David Schwimmer and The Pallbearer. And Beavis and Butthead Do America, which again is bullshit because Beavis and Butthead Do America is a fucking fantastic movie. Worst screenplay. The rest of these is a wipeout. So what swept the Golden Raspberries that year was Striptease with Demi Moore.
Okay.
Won Worst Picture, Worst Actress, Worst Director, Worst Original or Worst Screenplay, and Worst Original Song. So that's a movie our friend Reed and I have gone back and forth about because I think he thinks of that what we're kind of talking about Barb Wire is that it's kind of a fun campy movie, and I think that kind of, but it takes itself a bit too seriously. Not here to talk about striptease.
No. Maybe Reed needs to rewatch Striptease.
I wasn't trying to be too harsh, but I am on your side of history with that one, my friend. All right. I think we've covered Barb Wire as best we can right now. So we move into, as our recently departed friend Jerry Springer would say, our final thought.
Yes, because I would like to antagonize all our listeners in America. My final word.
How much is this going to cost me?
That depends on how you want to play.
Well, I like to play rough.
But just the one thing that I think needs to be expanded on in this conversation as we come to a close, and I think it's actually fitting that we were just talking about Striptease and how it's a bad movie, because it is a bad movie. I've seen it.
Seconded.
And somebody mentioned Showgirls, in the opening quotes, and
I forgot to circle back to that. You brought that up. I think you and I both agree this is much better than Showgirls.
Yes, and by a lot. Most movies we've covered on the show are better than Showgirls. But what they all have in common is just that their movies where sex is like upfront. And I kind of brought it up in Contreras Corner half joking, but it is true as far as, the big movies today. To say that they're sexless is very harsh. And it kind of misses the point, because at the same time they're kind of like supposed to be family entertainment, and unfortunately that means that the way that you acknowledge sexuality in a PG-13 movie, it's very muted.
Also, with modern audiences, it's a much more difficult high wire to navigate.
Yes, but that doesn't mean that it shouldn't be navigated. That's the problem.
Accurate.
I understand. There's two problems. One is that America in particular, and probably the world, like in general, that obviously depending where you land, but let's talk about America because that's where we live. It's still puritanical in some aspects of its lifestyle. And so that's the idea that, we used to work with people that were perfectly fine with taking their children to movies where there was a lot of violence, but if they showed boobs, and God forbid. And there is, I think that it automatically causes people to push back. Not everybody, I get it. Not everybody. If you dislike Barbed Wire for legitimate reasons, that's fine. But there are people that I think automatically went in just expecting to hate it, or preparing to not like it, or already thinking lowly of what they were going to watch just because they knew it was going to be, in quotation marks, like a sexy movie. It's...
dude, I'm sorry. I know this is your time, but you're speaking such truth. I need to jump in here.
Jump in.
Not just that, but there's that, and there's always been, and I've been guilty of it before too. But people went into this hating it because it's Pamela Anderson. It's this pretty girl with big breasts, and her being the star of this movie. I don't want to see any of that. I don't want these people to succeed. It's human nature sometimes, but especially with pretty people. People get mad when really pretty people succeed. And on top of it being a sexy movie, I think the idea that Universal financed this movie for this unproven commodity at the time who's really fucking hot to, be the star of this action movie. I agree with you 100% that I think a lot of people had their mind made up about this movie before they even watched it.
I mean, fuck, I did. That's what I was saying at the beginning of Real Talk. I was like, I had an image in my head.
I did too.
Of what Pamela
I thought
Anderson.
this was pornography.
You were very excited about it, and I was just, and I was reluctant to jump in just because I'm like, it's gonna be a bad movie with a hot girl, and it turned out to be a fun movie with a hot girl. Those exist, but I think that there's just this barrier whenever you try to sell that, and we've even, I think, drifted further apart for trying to give those movies a chance, and that's the other half of it. Because I understand that now we are more aware. We try to be more conscious of just the male gaze and that kind of stuff. But I think that it's also, you have to allow for times when it's all intentional and it's all part of the plan, and everybody that's taking part of it is actually, they're consenting adults and they're having fun and they want you to have fun. And it's like, a woman dancing in slow motion while she's half naked doesn't have to be necessarily a bad thing, But when a movie opens with that, you already like take a lot of people out because they're like, oh God, no, this is bad, It doesn't.
It doesn't make sense that we don't see more of this right now. And again, I'm not here to tell women how to live or do their thing. So I'll just from the male perspective of men in movies.
Right.
And I know we have history of men being hot in movies, but we live in the most body positive era in history. And so it's shocking to me that there's not more movies like this where people are just hot for the sake of being hot. I know a lot of people make the argument that's what movies are. It's just pretty people doing shit. But if this movie came out today and had this negative backlash, there would be a backlash on top of that you're body shaming or that
Yes.
you're not being positive on top of that. So it's insane. Barb Wire is an insane film.
But that's the thing. I think that, yes, movies are pretty people, but especially today, it feels like unless you're going to an art house movie or big releases, it's very rare that you actually see those pretty people expressing sexual desire besides a one-liner or something that's referenced in the back. And it's I'm not telling you that I want to see hot people fucking in every movie, but I would like an acknowledgement that sex is a thing that surrounds us, that happens, and some people can use it to further their goals. And I guess I watch a movie like Barb Wire that was made in the mid-90s, and it suddenly feels like, yes, you brought up, there's no green screen, it's practical effects, and it's almost 90 minutes. But on top of that, there's something else that we've kind of lost in the years since, and that is just this idea of let's have fun with sexuality in a mainstream movie. That's just, you go and see what's playing, and even if you put away the superhero movies, let's say that the place of sex and sexuality in a superhero movie is probably a conversation that just, we don't have time for that on this episode. But even other major releases,
Look, and I know specifically a couple of our friends and patrons have differing views on this, but there seems to be an idea that sex doesn't belong in movies anymore. And that's, in our Blue is the Warmest Color episode, we talk about having direct conversations with people that said that was unnecessary. And it's okay, that's your opinion, but what this filmmaker was trying to do and what this movie was trying to present involved that. And that's what we're talking about here today. Barb Wire, it's yeah, Barb's really fucking hot and uses how hot she is to her advantage. That inherently, isn't at a base level, that's not a bad thing. You can over rely on that. Friday the 13th, every girl who's in it has to be naked. Yes,
right.
That's at its base level not a good idea. But you know way more about the landscape today than I do. But even I can tell you it's a pendulum for sure. There are movies that rely way too heavily on it to a detriment, but it can be used to make a movie not just necessarily good, but in this case more fun because hot people are hot. And sometimes they do things hot people would do.
And I will say this, Alex, just because I don't doubt that there's at least one listener out there that's kind of shaking their head and going really, you make this point when you're talking about Barb Wire, but that's kind of that's the thing. It's not that Barb Wire becomes this prime example of what we're talking about, but it's just that the landscape, as you say, it's such that even when watching a movie like Barb Wire, that's something that comes to mind. It may not be a great movie.
Yeah, and it wouldn't mean as much, or we wouldn't be harping on it as much if it really didn't seem like so much of the criticism was just, oh, she's just a dumb blonde with big boobs. That seems to be like where so many people were coming from with it.
Yeah. So, sex good, hot women good, hot men good.
Hot men good.
Yes. Udo Kier good. Jango Fett not so good. But overall, it's a good time. Watch Barb Wire. Where are you landing? I'm torn between 3 and 3.5 stars.
My God. When I was doing my Letterboxd review, I had it at 2.5 because I thought just the first viewing was clouding my judgment when I had it at 3. And it was one of those y'all know if you have Letterboxd, you click if you click the third star, it highlights the whole star, and you click it again, it halves it. And I just kept going back and forth. And then I was like, you know what? Fuck it. This is getting 3 stars. And, I was, based on my history with it, I would say it's like a C plus, maybe even a B minus, upon rewatch. But what I was thinking about is if I was a teacher, it's the essay I get from the kid that I have these preconceived notions about not caring, or maybe he's not the brightest, or maybe, they're not tuned in, dialed in, or whatever. And I read their essay and I'm like, son of a bitch, this ain't an A, but this is a really damn solid entry right here.
There's a lot of misspellings, but there's something to this.
Exactly. Exactly. It's I think this immediately shoots to the top of the list of the movies we've done that right up there with Howard the Duck. And again, not as good as Howard the Duck, but really has an unfair and extremely misleading legacy. And that's kind of part of what we do here. We cover these movies that Showgirls. That movie, we came away from it thinking it was worse than people said it was.
Yes.
And then here we're just like, yeah, y'all were wrong about this, and time is definitively on our side of the argument with this. So, 3 stars on Letterboxd, undecided between C plus and B minus. But man, this is a really fun time. I'm glad I own it now. It's on the shelf, so this is a great background at a party movie,
Oh yeah.
So
no matter when you look, the odds are very high that you're gonna find something very entertaining on the screen.
Absolutely. So Gerald, I don't know what your motives were, man, but and I don't even know how much of this episode is gonna make the main feed, but brother, you got a hell of a conversation out of this. So well done, Julio. All right, main event time. Where are you landing?
I'm gonna land on 3 stars. It's tempting to do 3.5 just because a lot of I think that the conversation got me fired up to 3.5. But I'm not rating the conversation. I'm rating the movie, and the movie on its own has, after everything else that we talked, there are some things that just I don't like. The entire climax, it's just not my bag. It's just so hard, I think, to have an action sequence now that blows my mind. Maybe back in 96, 97, it would have been easier, but I was drifting in and out when they were just doing the car chase. And I know it's cool. I mean, it's not terrible and it's well shot, but I was like, no, can we just have more of Barb Wire being sassy and doing laps around all the men that are trying to manipulate her? That's a lot more fun. So yeah, I'm going to land on 3 stars, which is still really good. And I recommend it. I would say anybody that has any preconceived notions about this movie, just put them aside, just sit down for 90 minutes and kind of reevaluate how you feel about Pamela Anderson as an actress.
Yeah. In that article we read, it just kind of, she went through a lot in a brief period. I know there's a documentary on Netflix now about her life and times, and it's kind of motivated me more to check it out. Because wrestling transcends life and is everything. We'll close on Pamela Anderson, the 1995 Royal Rumble, which, of course, the winner of the Royal Rumble goes on to face the WWF champion at WrestleMania. She was in attendance for that. It was in Florida somewhere, and it was built as on the beach, and CJ from Baywatch is going to be here. And she sat ringside. Shawn Michaels won the Royal Rumble. She came in the ring, and he posed in front of her, and she giggled at it. And then at WrestleMania, Shawn Michaels was a bad guy. So somehow it ended up that Shawn Michaels came down to the ring with Jenny McCarthy, and then Kevin Nash Diesel, who's the good guy, came to the ring with Pamela Anderson. It was a star-studded affair. Nick Totoro was the ring announcer, I believe, and Jonathan Taylor Thomas was there. It was impossibly 1995, but they sat her and Jenny McCarthy at ringside during the Shawn Michaels Diesel match, and Pamela Anderson looked like she wanted to be anywhere else on the planet but at WrestleMania 11 in Hartford, Connecticut. And that's always made me appreciate her a little bit more, because only psychopaths really want to be at a wrestling event. So God bless her. Anyway, Gerald, this turned out to be way more than I thought. When we hopped on originally, I assumed Julio was going to not like this movie, so I thought this was going to be a really short episode. But man, we got in the weeds for you, brother. So we hope you got your money's worth off of it. That covers Barb Wire. So Julio, what's being thrown our way next?
Thrown our way, as mentioned on the patron pitch, next episode is going to be the Netflix movie Dolomite Is My Name, yet another in a series of Eddie Murphy comebacks. I guess it's too soon to tell if this one will stick, but it definitely got him some buzz, some heat. How much do you know about this movie, Alex?
I remember, like, when it came out, the buzz was pretty palpable. That's about the extent of my knowledge of it. But Dolomite is a gray area that I've always kind of wanted to cover, so I'm pretty fired up about this. That's
coming up next. And then, like I said, later this month on the Patreon feed, we'll be talking about an actual Dolomite movie. So it's kind of a two-parter.
All right. Well, Miss Anderson, it has been a pleasure. I don't know when we're going to cross paths here again, but I think we did your attempt at a leading role justice. So with that being said, we're going to move on into perennial plugs before we get out of here. We start off by giving thanks to the Festive Years, who provide our opening and closing tracks. They kick us off with Last Stand, take us home with Summer of 99. Be sure to head over to thefestiveyears.com for any and all Festive Years needs.
Our friend and fellow podcaster Hans Rotliser is the man behind our logo, behind all the graphics on our webpage, our Patreon page, our merch page. That little tomato looking at itself in the mirror, that's the work of Hans. So if you like his work, just contact him. Reach out to him on Twitter at Mildemonios, MILDEMONIOS, and tell him that you like his art. Or you can check out his website, mildemonios.pe. That's where he lists all the other stuff he does, books he writes, the podcasts he produces. He has a podcast called Nación Combi, which is about Peruvian current affairs. And he has a podcast called Marginal, which is about economy. And a whole bunch of novels, most of them about zombies. Just check out his work. Tell him he's great at drawing tomatoes. Whatever you want to do. Just be friendly to him. Hans, thank you for all your support.
Shout out to the boys over at latenightgrin.com. Recently recorded this month's Grin Grappler, or I guess May's Grin Grappler, covering the life and times of Kevin Owens, Kevin Steen. As always, a fun time with them, and always like to give them props, a shout out, because they help, even just through retweets or letting me on the show to plug what we do here on the Contrarians. They help our machine continue to run. So if you're into the world of professional wrestling, latenightgrin.com's got you covered. And having us covered is our social media team. Corey Ari, man, knocking them out of the park recently with some of our video shorts and just our warm-ups, discovering that Donald Trump's favorite movie is Paris, Texas, or Alien Day, whatever the charge may be. Corey's definitely been stepping up to the plate and knocking them out of the park. And as always, we appreciate Zoe Perez for the work she does for us as well. Facebook.com/ContrarianPrime, Instagram @ContrarianPrime, YouTube.com/@ContrarianPrime. Our Twitter's in the bumper. You can find us there. Thank you all so much for the work that you do for us. We really appreciate it. And we really appreciate you, especially this one. If you're here right now, man, you've made it through made it to the Steel Dominion or whatever the fuck the name of that city is and back.
You broke through the barricade.
You've made it to Canada if you've made it this far in the episode. We've had a hell of a time here. We thank you so much for joining us on yet another episode of The Contrarians, where we're right and you're wrong, and we will catch you next time.